Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the Sisters Corner podcast. Today's topic is going to be such an important topic because a lot of sisters, have a lot of questions with regards to it. And, when we're talking about femininity, and we've seen the trends that have come out, and a lot of people are very confused as to what to do. There's a lot of misconception, a lot of nuances, and a lot of fake things that are being spread, things that are actually harmful for us as women. Especially as Muslim women, right? And I saw your post on this and I was like, yes, this is one of the first people that I'm seeing is actually discussing these type of things. And I know that it's a topic that we don't really want to speak about because we are going to get backlash from the feminine gurus, so on and so forth. But it is something that we do have to speak about. But before we get to that, please do give us an introduction of yourself.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah khair, honestly, for having me on. It's an absolute honor to be here to begin with. Yeah, I'm super excited about today's podcast, obviously, and exactly what you said. Like nobody talks about this, and it's funny. I was just gonna type out exactly what I said. I was just gonna put it on my stories because I always rant on my stories. But I'm like, wait a second, people like don't talk about this. Like I need to actually do a post on this. So then I did, and you're right. It does. It's interesting. It gets criticism from basically like everyone. Somehow it upsets like a lot of different groups of people, I would say. But ultimately, the people that I think have a genuine heart, they realize oh wait, there's something here. There's something more to this, and alhamdulillah, it started some great conversations actually. And this is just, I guess, like a wonderful extension of that, basically.
There's a lot of black and white when it comes to this issue, especially. And I feel like what that does is there's a lot of women who want to be feminine, they want to embrace their femininity, but then they see this very picture perfect form of femininity that is being presented to them. And what these gurus are saying is like, if you're not this, then you're not, you're not feminine, right? There's a lot of nuance that is being negated in this instance. For example, not all women have it in life where they can just, relax and wait for their Prince Charming to come and be the protector and the provider, right? They have responsibilities, they have issues, a lot of financial issues, there's a lot of family issues, there's a lot of trauma that puts women in certain situations where they can't be in their full feminine. Now, are we saying to them that you're not woman because of that, right? So there's a lot of black and white in this situation. But
exactly, yeah, I think that was the whole point, right? I think that just that ignorance of the nuances, but also on top of that, ignorance of the Islamic perspective. I feel there's one. My biggest problem with these ideas of high value woman and soft girl era and this and that, now there's black cat energy and there's the sprinkle people, there's all these different groups and everything, and this will keep happening. There's always going to be a new trend, there's always going to be another term. You're always going to want to chase these certain traits basically that they keep describing. But ultimately we have to remember, as Muslims, we already know, we already have the answers. Rasulullah already explained it to us. His wives already told us, they left the most perfect example for you to follow. So why are Muslim women falling for these random characters, basically? Literally, they sound like characters out of a book. They just decide, oh, I want to be that character, let's live that life. Because again, I feel like a lot of times, in the West, their life, it lacks so much purpose for a lot of them. They don't have an organized religion. They don't have an organized deen, because for us, it's not just religion. Islam isn't just a religion. It's a deen. It's a way of life. It's like a complete guide in every single aspect of our life. And I think that's what was being ignored. And I feel like I feel like it's fine to follow these trends and stuff if you're like, if it's like on a secondary basis, but if that becomes your primary definition, then that's problematic, right? Because then what happens when it starts contradicting the Quran and Sunnah? What happens then? One thing that they preach about, which like, it's so ridiculous, is they talk about how the woman has value just by being. Just her being is enough value. You don't have to do anything. They literally actively preach against the act of doing, and they only talk about this act of being. They say that you confer value upon a man based on just being who you are. Apparently, just by sitting here and looking
Absolutely.
pretty, I'm adding this. This is literally what they genuinely believe. They literally say, that, like, by going on dates with a man and you're looking pretty, he's showing you off. So this is you conferring value on him, and that's all you have to do. So basically, all you have to do, your value to a man is just looking pretty. That's it. That's all you need to do. Anything beyond that, you don't need to do. And this is unfortunately, now we start seeing the same rhetoric. And this is crazy to me. This is what's absolutely crazy. You see the same kind of rhetoric from Muslim preachers. I've literally, a few days ago, there was a imam, a so-called imam. He was like, looking very scholarly, mashallah. He was on Instagram, but he was like lecturing actually, but it was like the clip was on Instagram, and he was talking about the same thing. He was saying the same exact thing as these like dating feminist, like kuffar people, literally. He was saying like, the woman, she doesn't have to do anything. He literally said that, and I was like, what? Him too? Like they're all saying the same thing. That's insane. And but really. But really, he
You
was
know,
saying
you
like,
know, you know, the you hear it a lot because I think something that we don't understand is that whenever we see a trend or a movement that comes from the West, all of their values is
yeah,
going to be it's going to be derived from liberalism. And what is liberalism? Liberalism is the worship of the nafs, right? So you hear a lot. I mean, you can
yes,
go deeper into it and you begin to hear things like the divine feminine, right? Now, aside from the
oh my
very
gosh,
scary wording, like just that should have us, alerted, as Muslimin, because the human beings are not divine, right?
literally,
But what this type of femininity, and this is the benchmark of femininity. This is really the from the West at least, right? What this type of femininity
uh-huh,
does, it preaches, it focuses on feeding the ego instead of healing the soul. When we talk
yes,
about embracing your femininity,
exactly,
we're talking about, embracing your womanhood, right? Healing those traumas that made you
yes,
hate, especially from society, because society made us hate our womanhood, right? It made us hate our men, right? It's about recovering your fitrah. And what is our recovering our fitrah? Because, a
yes,
lot of femininity coaches, you hear them when they're talking about embracing your femininity. Which femininity coach, even from the Muslims, which of them speak about the very first thing being um, your relationship with Allah? Because that's the fitrah. When we talk about the fitrah of the human
exactly,
being, is the fitrah is recognizing your Lord and submitting to your Lord. That is the first form of
exactly,
embracing your femininity. But which of these
exactly,
femininity, they have so much to say about embracing your femininity. They never mention this part. You heal your fitrah, as in your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then everything else will come into place. But what do we see by these femininity gurus, whether they be Muslim or non-Muslims? They are preaching the
yes,
worship of the ego. That's why they say things like, you must
yeah,
just receive, just that
yeah,
receiving energy. And I'm like, yeah, receive help, receive compliments, learn to do that. But
sure,
you don't just receive, because that's very individualistic. It means that your whole focus in life is what you can get from people, what you can get
what
from
you
men,
can get,
what you can get from others. What
mm-hmm.
about giving? In Islam, we know that the very first jihad is the jihad against the nafs. Isn't
Mm-hmm.
that right? Right?
Yeah,
But we
yeah,
are yet
yeah,
we are
that's right,
following these femininity gurus and they're preaching of, serving the nafs. Literally,
yeah,
what we see now, the femininity scam that is going on
yeah,
around now, is these women are
mm-hmm.
teaching other women how to receive, how to serve themselves. Your value is only in you. And then let's go to the
yes,
actual
literally,
superficial side of femininity. The way you
mm-hmm.
dress, the way you act, right? It must be seductive. I know there's this very, very famous femininity coach, and I used to follow her. And a lot of her content was literally in the way that you wear. none of her content was about the actual inner work that it takes, right? It was about the way you wear it. Was about,
that's true.
you gotta wear red because red is seductive and it catches the, you know, men's eyes, and makeup like
The way you
this, and
walk.
you know,
They talk
the
about
way you
all
walk,
these things.
right? The way you enter a room. And I'm like,
Yeah.
where's the inner work here, right? So it's all about the nafs. And this is something that so many Muslim women are falling for without realizing how it contradicts Islam.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing I want to say, so like a lot of this, there are definitely a lot of those coaches, right, where they're just so surface level, but there's also still like some of those femininity coaches that talk about some inner work, right? But even that is like it's not headed in the right direction, because like a lot of what they talk about also is like they talk about like a fear of dependency. Like they promote being completely independent, and then like but then you let a man take care of you, but like you're independent. How does that, first of all, how does that work? That doesn't make sense. But also, like, if you think about an actual marriage, right, if you think about what we've actually seen, dude, marriage is dependency. Like, I don't know why people can't, like, why people are so scared of just accepting that marriage, real marriage, is dependency. And when you have that real dependency, I am dependent as heck on my husband, and my husband is also dependent on me for a lot of things. Like, it's codependency. I'm not independent of him. He's not independent of me. That's not how real long-term marriage works. And a lot of times these people, like, when they're preaching these things about, like, being safe and like detached love basically and all this stuff, you have to remember, again, they're coming from the mindset of the West. They're coming from the mindset of the kuffar, where they have to deal with, like, dating non-mahram men. And so when they talk about, like, being detached, or you don't owe anything to a man, they're talking about non-mahram boyfriends. They're talking about their boyfriends. They're not talking about a halal Muslim husband. And I think a lot of times people don't make that distinction. Like, they're just consuming this content and they're internalizing it, but they don't realize this doesn't apply to you as a Muslim married woman. It's not the same. You're not the same. You shouldn't be the same. You shouldn't strive to be that. Like, again, you have to, like, go back to the fitrah. And exactly that. I think if we could just submit to the fitrah, right? If all we did, literally, if we didn't listen to a single coach on Instagram, if we didn't listen to anyone, if all we did was just picked up Quran and Sunnah, if that's all we did in our life, you would be the most feminine. You would be perfectly balanced. You would be the high value woman. You would be everything. You would be stellar. Like, there would be no need for anything beyond that. So I think people just keep forgetting that, and they, like, a lot of times we get swept up into the trendiness of these terms and stuff, but it can't come above the Quran and Sunnah. That's what it has to
Yeah,
be.
absolutely. I think the whole thing about being independent, even in the general
Yeah.
sense, right, is a whole lie. Human beings are social
Yeah.
creatures, right? We interact with each other. It's everything we do is an exchange, right? People say, it's so hilarious. People say, I don't want to be used. Oh my gosh, you used me. I'm like, do you want to be useless as a human being? You want to be, people use you because that means you have value. Or do you want to be a nobody, just
That
useless?
means you have,
Of
that's
course,
true.
people are going to use you, right? And it's good to be useful,
Right.
right? But you see, these are the type of
Exactly.
rhetorics you see in films, in modern films. I don't want to be used. Oh, look, he's using me. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're also using him.
Literally.
Every
That's
in
true.
every way,
That's
in
true.
every way. Human beings are useful things, right? Or useful beings,
Yes,
right? And so
exactly.
the whole thing about being independent, whether in marriage, whether in
Hmm.
life, whatever it is, there is no such thing as being
Yeah.
independent, right?
There isn't. It
We
doesn't
are
make sense. It does not make
co-independent,
sense.
we are codependent on each other. That's how life functions, right? If everybody lived alone,
Exactly.
there would be no life, right? There would be no society. Everything is based on our dependency on each other, right? That's one thing. Another thing, women
Exactly.
want to be in a position where they don't where they don't want to feel their man, that they need their man, right? What this does to marriage,
Yeah.
because men have an inherent and instinctual feeling of being needed. which, by the way, women have it too.
Yes,
Human beings have it. Like
exactly.
I always give this example that if you're working in a project, right? Let's say you're working in a project,
Yeah.
and everybody in the project keeps on dismissing you and acting like they don't need you. Like, oh, we don't need you. Are you gonna stay there? Are you gonna show
Yeah.
up? Are you gonna put in effort to,
You would.
to give your piece? No, you're gonna turn around and go away. It's the same thing with men. So if a man is in a marriage and you're like, oh, I don't need you. I got my money. I don't need you. I don't need
Exactly.
you. What you doing here? He's gonna walk out on you.
So this is so real, and this is why also I feel like these coaches are setting so many people up for literal failure when it comes to marriage, because literally it is all about being needed and needing, like literally. Like if I think about myself too, right? Like it's been what, almost 7 years since we've been married, and dude, the way that a man steps up, literally the way, if he's a good man, right? If you chose a good man, regardless of what his circumstances were, the way that he levels up when you truly submit and you show that submission to him and he senses that submission in you is totally different. If like girls, they want somebody who loves them like 100%. Oh, I want somebody like, I want this, I want that. If you want that kind of deep understanding, you want that kind of deep connection, you want that soulmate kind of love, like, you want that, you have to be willing to submit. You have to be willing to be dependent, literally, because you're right. That's what it does. It kicks in that instinct for the men, the needing to be needed, literally. And that is so valuable to them. It is so valuable.
Absolutely. That leads me to a question that I want to ask you. What's one of the most important thing for a woman to embrace her femininity, particularly in a marriage context, is to find a man who will nurture that, right? Because many women end up getting married and the men themselves are emasculated, right? Or they're already programmed by society to want the woman that works, and the 50-50 and stuff like that, right? So I always advise women, right? It's very easy to obey a man who you love and you trust, right? So that's one of the big steps, right? So when a woman is coming to get married, what are the characteristics that she should look for that will, to some extent, because it's always a risky situation, but to some extent guarantee her that, she'll be able to embrace her femininity because this man is a protector and provider.
It's so funny that you're asking this, because I'm literally working on a free ebook right now that kind of literally goes into this exact thing. So, but yes, so what I would say, a few things, right? But number one, at the forefront, always lead with the Quran and Sunnah. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he already answered this. He said that when a man comes to you and you are pleased with his religion and his manners, then marry him. And if you do not do so, there will be fitna and fasad in the land. This is the hadith. Now, it is a da'if hadith, so that's a good point to mention. But still, all the scholars have said that it's okay to derive, benefits from da'if hadith because it's not fabricated. Fabricated hadith is totally different. This is just weakness in the narration, right? So that's one thing. So the hadith is good to take from. Now, what it talks about, two things, literally, and that's it. That's literally all you need. Like, and also one thing that I really love about this hadith is notice how it could be different. It could mean different things to different people. Like, it says somebody whose religion and manners you are pleased with. So that means different people have different standards. So, like, if you're comfortable with their level of deen, like, obviously they have to be like, obviously baseline, like, of course. But like, the more I believe, the more religious a man is, the luckier you'll be, basically. The best thing you can do is marry a religious man. Now that obviously comes with, like, certain other things. Like, for example, if you yourself don't wear, if you only wear hijab maybe, and you like to wear cute clothes, you don't wear an abaya, then the religious man is not going to, a true, genuine, like, really religious man is not going to put up with that, to be honest with you, because he doesn't want his wife committing tabarruj. He has ghira. And so you have to learn to submit to his ghira as well. And the thing is, but this is what I wish people would understand, is that when you marry a super religious man, the things that you submit to him for, will be good for your own soul. Literally, it will bring khair to you. It will bring khair in your life. It will bring khair in your marriage. Like, when he says you're not going out looking like that. You're not allowed to go like that. You're not allowed to wear that outside. Why are you wearing this outside? That's for your own good. Literally, he is protecting you. He is safeguarding you from, first of all, haram, literally, but also from perverted eyes, literally. So that's what I say, literally. Just when you're looking for a man to marry the religious man. That's it. And put that above everything, literally. Basic attraction is important. That's another thing. People some people go on the other extreme where they say, oh, you can't, looks don't matter, right? That's not true. That's not true. Looks don't matter is not true. Looks do matter, but to a basic extent. Okay, that's what I've experienced. What I feel like is there's so much more to a person's there's so much more to attraction than just a person's face or just their looks, right? The way they talk, the way they stand, his aura when he walks, like the way he looks, like everything. There's so many things. The way he
people,
drinks,
the character.
dude, the way he deals, of course, that all of these things, these things grow your attraction for someone, literally. And this is why, this is why people fall in love over time, right? That idea, why does that happen? Because they're so good natured. Somebody that you maybe weren't super attracted to, you ultimately end up being insanely attracted to, because personality does beautify a person, so that is very, very, very real. But still, I would say that there needs to be at least a basic level of attraction. I don't encourage ever to marry someone that you're not attracted to at all. If you how people say I'm getting the ick. So if you're getting the ick from someone, that's just a no. And it's okay to say no to people based on that. Literally, the scholars have talked about it. It's totally fine. But I just wish people wouldn't be so picky about a lot of secondary things over the religion. Because if you find a good religious man that's willing to marry you, honestly, you're lucky. So I would jump on that.
Yeah. Just one thing that I wanted to add is, with religion, also character, because there are a lot of people, personally, that I know, men or even women, right, who are knowledgeable, and they have the knowledge, but they also, they can be manipulative. They can be
they twist it,
they
dude.
they're bad people. They're not good people, right? They're not generally good people. So and it's funny because Islam teaches us to have akhlaq, and it teaches us to have proper character, good conduct. So with religion comes that character. It's not about, just the words, it's about the action, right? We always know how important the action is. So focusing on looking at this person. Does this person actually do what they preach, right? Do they actually practice it? Are they good people? SubhanAllah. So I want to move on to another topic that I feel is related to what we're discussing. A lot of sisters want to know from the Islamic perspective how to embrace their femininity. Now, earlier on, I did mention that, just hold on, I can feel some echoes. Do you mind just muting yourself for a bit? Sorry about that. So yeah, earlier on, I mentioned that the very first step that I personally give when I do femininity coaching is, first, we need to find your fitrah, right? First, you need to go back to your submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is the baseline of your fitrah. If you don't believe that, then everything else, you're always going to have questions about Islam. You're always going to have questions about this and about that, because Islam does not cater to the nafs. So your nafs is going to fight you. There are certain things you're going to come across that you're not going to be happy about. When we're talking about Islamic femininity, right, which is a term I probably just made up, but I like to call it the fitrah. I don't even like to call it masculinity and femininity. I like to call it the fitrah, because a man will be a man if left be, and a woman will be a woman if left be, right? But it's society, it's customs, it's programming that changes the way that we see things. So one of the first things that's one of the first things that comes to my mind is going back to the fitrah. But beyond that, what are some of the steps from your perspective, before I give my perspective, what from your perspective are some of the steps or advice that you would give for sisters to embrace their femininity?
Okay, so definitely fitrah, you're right. Absolutely. That's, I think, the absolute first step. And with that, everything else, I think, kind of just comes into line as it is, right? Because Dude, again, like Islam is an entire thing. We are so blessed to be Muslim. We are so blessed to have literally every single thing already laid out for us. The treatment of the spouse, like, you know, how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the way that he would talk to his wives, the way, like, so many things, like beautifying yourself for your spouse. These are all Islamic concepts. Like, nobody today in 2024 needs to come up with, like, you know, an original path to success of femininity or anything of the sort. Literally, we just have to go back to the Quran and Sunnah. That's it. But in general, what do we learn? Like you said, like Islamic femininity, right? I love that. And I think some of that beyond, like in coming back to the fitrah, some of the things that you kind of adopt, right? The closer you are to the Sunnah, the things that kind of you start embodying, basically, I would say, is one thing is the way that you address your husband. So there's a quote from one of the Salaf where they said that we used to speak to our husbands the way like kings, like, you know. And so that's another thing. Like, this is part of Islamic femininity, actually. And this is something that actually takes so much time. Like, dude, just yesterday I was seeing a video, I was going through old pictures, and I saw like an old video of myself, and I heard the way that I was talking to my husband in it. And I literally slapped my face. Like, I was like, why would you talk like that? Like, that's so bad. Like, it was just like, you know. And so it's a learning curve, right? You're not going to learn it overnight. It takes years. But I think if you're committed to growth and you're taking it step by step, you're like, you know, in the environment where, alhamdulillah, you've chosen a good man, then everything starts falling into place. That's the first thing that I would say. Like, especially speech is so important. Speech is so important. And I think there's like a conference or a workshop or something that somebody's doing recently. I saw it about how words are possibly destroying your marriage, kind of thing. And this is so true. This is so real. This is literally so real. So that's something that I think the more you actively work on, the better it is. Like, listen to yourself, really. Like, when you're trying to address your husband, think about it. Think about what words you're going to use, what tone you're going to use. Don't just blurt things out. The less you blurt things out, the less, like, you know, the less mistakes you'll make, basically. And to be more mindful. There was another thing I once heard, another tip, like, for example, I think this has been really important, is when you want to address something, right? Let's say an issue occurs in a marriage and you want to address it. Part of what's like, these are like actionable steps, right? That have actually, I feel like, increased my own Islamic femininity. So this is what I'm talking about. But this idea of, like, when you need to address something, to make an appointment with your husband, almost like to say, oh, there's something that I need to talk about, like, when would be a good time to talk about it? And that does so many things already. Like, first of all, it means that you're not reacting immediately. That means, right, you're holding back your reaction. You're being smart about how you react. Let's say he did X and it upsets you, right? Something is really bothering you. You're not going to go screaming at him like, da 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 da, you did this, you always do this, why'd you do this, and you couldn't have done that, and why didn't you do that, and all this stuff. You're not doing none of that. You're going to say, there's something I need to talk about. So that already, like, you know, you took away, because in the heat of the moment, when you are most emotional, when you're hurt, when you're angry, the things that you say, you will always regret it. You'll always regret it. You'll regret that tone. You'll regret the word you used. It's going to be, like, you know, a volatile situation. It's going to cause a reaction in him as well that he's going to regret as well. So it's just a double-edged sword. It's something that you want to always avoid, right? And again, this is also an Islamic concept. Like, the one who abandons anger, like, you know, the one who abandons an argument, Rasulullah guaranteed for them like a house in Jannah. Literally, that's how important it is to abandon argument. Like, these are all ultimately Islamic concepts. Islamic femininity, really, in its purest form, is nothing except Islamic. And I wish more people understood that. So that's one thing I would advise, like, you know, taking the time and space to discuss things that bother you at a later time and not in the heat of the moment. That's absolutely essential. Another thing, generally, yes, of course, dressing yourself well, making sure, like, you know, taking care of your appearance and all this stuff within the house, within the boundaries of Islam. This it also has a huge impact, to be honest with you. Things like literally, and like, it seems superficial, but things like wearing your hair down versus in a messy bun. Like, a lot of times, I'm a mom, right? I have like 3 kids. And dude, we moved to Pakistan, right? And Pakistan, it's hot. It's hot over here. Making the not just get so caught up in just like these things and making time for yourself. This is so important. Literally, even, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate. Like literally, men appreciate the little things. They really do. If he's a good man, right? Again, we're assuming that you married someone who has good religion and has good manners, right? Good mannerisms, good character. They will be appreciative. They do notice the difference and they respond. Like, even if they don't, my husband is the worst at giving compliments, by the way. He never compliments me, but they respond in other ways. Like, you can tell the way that they speak to you, their mood, all these things, like, and that's enough for me. Like, you have to also like, if words of affirmation is your love language, and I have a bone to pick with these love language people as well, because I feel like it's just so unrealistic, dude. Like, you're not. What happens when your husband doesn't speak your love language? What if he just doesn't? What if does that mean he doesn't love you? Like, does that mean you have to just cry forever and you gotta force him to accept your love language and he must give you compliments? Like, the more but anyways, that's a whole other story.
I mean, that comes from a lot of misconceptions that we have been programmed by, especially, in books, in films, where we see this type of romance that is, all over the place, and then we kind of expect that from our partners, right?
Yeah.
That's one thing. Another thing is we think men think like women, right? I mean, just think about how many times we compliment each other as women. Like, in a day, at least 10 compliments, right? My friends are always complimenting me. I'm always complimenting them. That's kind of the way that we women communicate with each other. That's not really how men will they'll compliment you more in the actions and the things that they do than in their words. And that's the same for them, because that's just how the man is, that's how he's programmed to be. SubhanAllah.
Exactly.
That's one thing. Another thing that I want to bring to mind with something that you mentioned, with regards to the speech, and the way that we address these men. That really does stem from respect, having respect for your husband and recognizing his status as the man of the house. Because I think what modern relationships have shown us is the whole idea of friendship. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be a friend of your husband, but is your marriage a marriage, or is it a friendship? Because that's basically friend zoning your husband. You're literally friend zoning your husband. Do you want to friend zone? Don't people get offended when I'm friend zoned? But people are turning their marriages into friend zones, and we don't want to do that. I'm not saying you shouldn't have that comfortable relationship with your husband, but this man is the man of the house. The way that you address a king, the way that you address a president, the way that you address a CEO, the way that you address a senior person, you speak to them with disrespect, with casuality, with informality, with, do you lash out at them? Do you think about what you're going to say, right? You formulate your sentences. That comes out of respect.
Another thing I want to point out is this does not affect the honesty or the closeness of your relationship, because the spousal relationship, dude, it's something else. It is so, like, subhanallah, when Allah said he has praised mawadda and rahma, like these two things, right, between the spouses, there's no better way to describe the spousal relationship. But really, like me and my husband, for example, I talk to him about literally everything. Like, actually, most of my best friends, like, I'm not really best friends with them anymore. Life happened. I don't know. We grew apart. Things happened. I do have a lot of friends, alhamdulillah. I have a lot of friends, actually. I'm a social person in general. But still, like, the way that I do talk to my husband about all sorts of concerns as well. Like, literally anything that is on my mind. Sometimes, like, oh, this happened today. Oh, that happened. Like, so it doesn't mean just because, like, we're not advocating for a barrier in communication, because, like, also I think when a lot of people think about, like, addressing a king, or they think about addressing, like, the CEO, they think that there's like a barrier over there. And, like, the barrier is not in terms of like a lack of communication, because communication is absolute key. absolute key for a marriage success, right? So it's not a barrier in communication, but what it is again within the realms of respect, because Islam shows you the guidelines where like everything within its boundaries, right? Nothing is 100%, like nothing is in no relationship will it just be like, just like no kind of guidelines. Even within the spousal relationship, there are limits, there are guidelines that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you to follow. Like for example, like there's certain things that you're not allowed to talk to your husband about, like when it comes to, for example, other women, right? There's just like things like that. So there's that's the only thing that I would clarify with regards to the way that you address your husband and the way you talk to your husband, basically.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's not a barrier of communication. It's a form of communication. It's just this communication is still happening. It's just in a very different way, and it's in a way because when there's respect, there's honor, and a relationship that is based on honor, it lasts long. You feel respect, you feel honored, you feel that that's a place that you want to stay in, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, subhanallah. So are there any other tips with regards to embracing femininity, or can we move on to I think we have a few more questions from the sisters.
Yeah, I think we can move on.
Okay. So a lot of women are coming with questions with regards to work, studies, ambitions, stuff like that. Now, all right, so one of the things is that there are certain women who have to go out and work because of the circumstances that they are in. And then there's a second category of women who I'm going to start with them, of women who are pushed by society and societal values to go into careers. So, and I'll also say in this category, there are also women who just generally are more ambitious. Like they have, I want to be a doctor or a scientist or whatever it is, right? Now, I'm not saying, I don't like to use the word ambitious in this sense because we can also be ambitious as homemakers, right? Now, for those women, what I have personally, and I want to know your thoughts on this, what I have personally said to these type of women is, so there are certain women in society who, and I think personally for me, we do have that fard kifaya presence of women out in society. For example, gynecologists, teachers for Muslim women, so on and so forth, campaigners for Muslim women, whatever the case is. And I see a lot of young sisters saying that this is the excuse that I can use to not get married. But for me, I don't believe that that's it. I don't believe that even the Islamic solution is that you don't have to sacrifice marriage. What we have been conditioned by society is to believe that it's either career or it's either marriage. And then what happens? Women go down the career road, they reach 35, they reach 40, they want children, the maternal instinct is there, but it's too late, right? So for me, what I give them is that you can get married, have children. When your children are older and a little bit more independent, right? Go and whatever ambitions, whatever skills that you have, use that for the ummah. That's one of the most important thing that I always tell women, whether it's marriage, whether it's career, always let it be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Anything that you do. So even when you're thinking about what career you want, what skills you have, right? You're a good writer, write books. But what type of books are you going to write? Are you going to write it because of fame, because of money, because of career, or are you going to write it for the ummah, for the Muslim woman, right? We can use our skills for the ummah, and at the same time preserve the family unit, right? And because we need families, we need children, we need progeny. The ummah, we don't want the ummah to just be stagnant. We have power in our population, right? And so we have a responsibility, and just think about the amount of rewards that we get when we're serving our husbands, when we're serving our children. Every single thing that we are doing is, I mean, if you're really thinking about your akhirah, I mean, there was a hadith, wasn't it, that the woman who obeys her husband.
Exactly. That's exactly. I was just about to bring that one up. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it gives us the categories that that, and what happens, what is at the end of the hadith is she gets Jannah from any door that she wants. So if you're really focused on the akhirah, it's the easiest way is right is right here, right? But so many of us have been programmed into the idea of for it to be for the self, right? I want the fame, I want the reputation, I want the financial independence. You're doing these things for the wrong intentions, right? But now, what is your thoughts on that? Woman working, femininity. What is your thoughts on that?
I mean, okay, so like, one thing I'll say is that it depends, right? First of all, if somebody is in just is in that situation where they have to work, like, for example, like they're maybe not married or they are married and they're going through financial difficulties, the men around them just don't have the opportunities. Maybe like, I mean, economy is bad, this is bad. Like it's possible, it happens. Literally, there's so many people that cannot survive on a single income household just because of the countries that they live in, the kind of jobs that their husbands have been able to do or whatever. Like, and that's just the ultimate reality of their situation. And this is why it doesn't make sense to have this kind of like, oh, femininity is all about just being, just receiving, just sitting at home and doing nothing. That is absolutely no. Femininity is about serving. Islamic femininity is about serving, literally serving your family, serving your husband, in whatever ways. And if you can contribute, like, if your family needs you to earn and you step up, then that is a good thing that you are doing. And you know what? Even if that means that you're not at ease and you're not chilling, and it means that maybe your nails aren't done because you don't have money for like, I don't know, getting like acrylics are haram anyway, but like, you know what I mean, right? You know what I
You
mean? That
still
doesn't
and
take away.
going out and working there, you still get rewarded, by the way. A lot of women
Exactly.
don't know this, but when you go out and you work for your family because you have to, you get rewarded for that. So,
I think, again, stepping up for your family when there is need is a righteous thing to do. That's number one. And anything that is a righteous thing, anything that is pleasing to Allah, anything that you do, like that is going to help your family and you're doing it within the rules of Sharia, then that is not going to harm you. That is not going to be a bad thing for you. That is not, and even if it takes away from your femininity, then that's fine. That's totally fine. Because what was the
absolutely.
definition of your femininity? Like, who were you basing that on? Like, who told you that you are lesser because of that? Did Allah tell you that? If Allah didn't say that, then why do you believe that about yourself? So that's one thing
Yeah.
that I'll say. And same thing with education. I mean, obviously, I'm all for work from home situations. Obviously, I mean, that would be the ideal thing, of course, but it's just not for, like, not everyone is able to do that because, maybe they've progressed far enough. Like, but a lot of, I think if you can take, if you have the ability and if you have some time to work towards working from home, then you really should prioritize that. Because again, now we have the internet. There's so many ways. There's so many things you could be doing. So there is that option. And if you're able to avail it, then sure, try to do that. But again, working outside the home, as long as it's within Shari'i like guidelines, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it might actually be beneficial for your family. So that's the other thing. And as for teachers and this, so here's one thing I'll tell you. My sister, right? My sister was studying to be. She wanted to be an engineer. Which is like, like what, like why would you want to be an engineer? But she thought, like, again, she was young. She was really young when she wanted to be an engineer, and also like, again, it's a cool thing. Like imagine a female engineer and a Muslima engineer, and this is in America, right? So like a hijabi engineer. Like back in the day, these things were like, super. Like when we went to school, this was very like uncommon. Like for example, when I
Yeah.
was in college, there wasn't a single niqabi when I was in college. Like there was like one other hijab wearing person, and that's it. So like
So
to we want to, in the West, a lot of times this is what Western Muslims fall for. Like we want to present Islam as very forward a lot of times, right? Because we want it to be appealing to the Western non-Muslims, to the kuffar. But that's not, and we try to do that in ways like this. Like, like for example, I studied neuroscience, and I would tell all my professors, oh, I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. I'm going to be a neurosurgeon. Good Lord.
subhanallah.
Now, to be fair, To be fair, I probably would have become a neurosurgeon if I didn't get married. That was literally my backup. Like that's why I did neuroscience. It's very interesting to me. So that was my thing. I was like, either I get married and become a housewife and like, live the homemaker life as much as I can, or I become a neurosurgeon. And that's the kind of career, honestly, that you can't do both with. Like if I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, actually, you couldn't, I wouldn't, it's humanly so difficult to try to maintain the balance of family and that kind of work. So what we need to
Maybe
be
when your
teaching
children are
girls,
older.
especially teenagers, yeah, when your children are older, yeah, honestly, I could probably still do that. Like why wouldn't I be able to do that,
Yeah.
inshallah? But
I'm
I think
actually
what needs to be
rooting
done
for
for
you,
teenagers,
girl.
right? Because, and this is something that you mentioned, right? Where whenever you're working, have that intention of doing it for Allah's sake. And honestly, alhamdulillah, she's doing fantastically well. She's literally the best teacher in her school. She's phenomenal. Allahumma barik. She's incredible. Like, I have no words. She's doing fantastically well. And she's doing better than she would have as an engineer. So when you make sacrifices, first of all, for Allah's sake, right? She still has a career. She's still earning. She's still working, but she's doing it within the Shari'i guidelines, and she's doing it in more beyond the Shari'i guidelines. She's doing what is most pleasing to Allah, basically, which is preserving the Islamic tarbiyah. She works at an Islamic school, so she's preserving and helping with the tarbiyah of children, of Muslim children in a non-Muslim country. That's a fantastic
Absolutely.
job. What more could you want?
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely, this brings me to really the fundamental basis of this topic, is that what you're taught of femininity is in being, when instead it's not about certain characteristics that you must embody. I personally see, the way I see it, that femininity in Islam is a conduct of manner. It's the way that you carry yourself. It's the intentions that you have. And we see this in the Quran, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about the character of women, and even in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We see that it is in sabr, right? It's haya, in respect, in obedience, in striving against the nafs, right? These are the characteristics that describe us as Muslim women, right? Whatever it is that we do, it goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It goes back to the deen, our service of the deen. It's giving back to the deen, our whole existence. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says he did not create the jinn and humankind except to worship him, right? That's that's the essence of our fitrah, right? And this is always why I always say that the first step to embracing your femininity is to go back to your fitrah, to go back to submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And then everything after that, everything you do, right? It's not based on whether, I'm going to lose my femininity. It's based on, does it please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or not? And then you get rewarded, because this life is not meant to be easy, right? So if you're focused on how I can make sure to embrace my femininity fully, and I got to do this, I got to look like this, instead of focusing on what do I do and what can I do and how do I please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that takes you away from the deen. That becomes the divine feminine self-worship, all that type of stuff, right? That's the real scam that Muslims unfortunately are falling for.
Literally, Muslims are falling for that, because I don't know if you saw that video. It was a Muslim girl, right, that was saying, trying to equate Hazrat Khadija radiallahu anha with being, I can't even say it. I'm not even gonna say it. With being like, that kind of feminine. Like, that's insane. How did we fall so far that we get to this point of, like, as Muslims trying to say these things? But it's like, these are the dangers of living in the West, to be honest with you. This all just comes from that, ultimately. But even while you're living there, again, there's just that little reframing. Sometimes that's all it takes. Like, literally, my sister's example, where, like, she was like, she wants a career, she wants to work, and she wants to, like, because, I mean, she's single, why not? Like, so she, after doing her education, but I think if we just coached enough teenagers, because these are decisions that teenagers are making. Like, when do you decide your major
Career.
in college? When you're 18, like, you're starting. So, like, that's when you need to decide it. And if you choose something like teaching, that is like, this is the best thing for women to get into, because also like the future, the way that you'll be able to do tarbiyah of your own kids is phenomenal. That's going to be like on another level entirely. So if we could just teach like teenage Muslims about the career paths that would be safe for them, because honestly, it's a lot of fear-based thinking, right? Like the reason they don't want to get married, a lot of times the reason that people delay marriage is because, oh, what if he turns out like, what if it's a toxic, what if it's a toxic marriage and I need to escape, but I'm not going to be able to leave if I don't have a financial background and if I don't have financial support for myself and if I'm not independent. So that's why I have to be independent. That's why I have to have a career first. That's why I have to have an education first. But if we just like, maybe instead of even college, if we worked on like high income skills, literally, what if you took an approach where you built skills instead? Wouldn't we be equipping our sisters, our Muslimah sisters, better in that way in order for them to have successful marriages and successful careers? Because you could do both. There's nothing at all to say that you can't do both. But there are Shari'i guidelines that you must follow. And when you do that, that's when you will that's when you will reach literally ultimate, like, happiness, because you're going to be serving Allah and you're going to be serving your family and you're going to be serving your husband. And this is like, you're everything just falls into line. And to live a life like that is, it's just so peaceful. You are so at peace with your fitrah. You become at peace with yourself. And it becomes so beneficial. It becomes productive. Literally, the people around you benefit from it. You are a pleasure to be around. Literally, it transforms you. This is the kind of feminine that needs to be promoted. Like, this is the Islamic femininity, basically. The empowered Islamic femininity. I used to feel really like, I used to have a lot of thoughts about the word empowered. But to be honest with you, like in this way, empowerment in this way, with Allah, empowered by the Quran, empowered by Islam, this is true empowerment. And this is what we need to be
Absolutely.
talking more about, because even, dude, I don't know why these Muslim, even the Muslim coaches, I don't know why they don't talk about this. I really don't understand. I don't know if it's because they're trying to also appeal to like a wider audience, basically. So they're trying to also include the Western, like, kuffar as well. So that's why they're preaching maybe a very general kind of, femininity that doesn't go against like the kuffar's mindset. But it's doing harm, because then Muslim girls are
Absolutely.
following them, because, this girl's wearing a
Yeah.
hijab. And so she must be, this is Islamic femininity then. That's what they
Yeah.
think. But that's not Islamic femininity. That's not the standard at all. That's
Exactly.
so far from the standard.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you put it so perfectly. Like everything that we've been saying, it just comes to this one point here, that this is what the true Islamic femininity is. And I feel like, I hope that the sisters that are watching this can really take this in and understand. The next time you see a femininity coach speaking about it, watch what she says. The first thing that she says, is it about serving yourself or is it about serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Your intentions, what it is. As Muslimin, everything we do should be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it's a really great way, to come to the end of today's discussion, which thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. Very much needed. I hope the sisters benefit from it. If you guys have any questions, make sure to put it down in the comment sections, and inshallah we will be doing more podcasts to discuss these type of issues. So any questions, any queries, any elaboration that you guys need, make sure to mention it down in the comment section, as well as your thoughts. Inshallah, we hope that this was very beneficial, and thank you so much, Qa'qaa, for joining me on this lovely podcast.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for having me, honestly, and for bringing this up, because it is really so important.